I'm here today with Katie Bordelon, and she is a lost mama who is here to share her story about her loss. Tell us about the things that she's learned throughout this experience. And we're going to talk a little bit about her faith and how she leaned into it to help in her healing. So, welcome, Katie. I'm so excited for you to be here with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes. So why don't we begin with what your loss story was?
Yeah. So it was a normal Tuesday. I went to work, my husband went to work, and we got home, had dinner, and I took a bath. And when I got out of the bath, I had to use the bathroom because, pregnancy hormones. I was finally able to go to the restroom. And I started having pain. And I wasn't thinking anything of it. It was just like coming and going. And I went downstairs. My husband was downstairs watching TV. And I was telling him, I'm like, man, I got these like sharp pains. Still not thinking anything of it. So I had to go to the bathroom again. And when I went to the bathroom, I started like sweating and like I had the chills like uncontrollably. And then I felt like I was going to throw up the same time I'm using the bathroom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I must have caught a stomach bug because my stepson had had a stomach bug like 1 or 2 weeks before that. So still not thinking anything. And so the pain is just like coming and coming and going. And I'm like, oh gosh, like this is pretty brutal. But it wasn't like unbearable. So I lay down on the sofa and I'm like, I told my husband, I was like, man, I had pains. I was just like sweating. Like maybe I just had a stomach bug. So I fell asleep and then I woke up in pain. And I'm like, man, something's not right. Like, I just don't understand why I'm having these pains. And they were pretty low. And I'm not thinking anything with the babies whatsoever. So it's pretty late. And my husband's like, I think I'm going to go to sleep. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm right behind you. I just have to use the bathroom again. So I went to the bathroom and I felt like this big gust. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, trying to think about it, and I'm like, "Where did this come from?" And so I'm like, "Oh gosh." So I'm like nervous to look down, and it was completely like clear liquid. And I mean, I've never been pregnant before, and it was my first pregnancy, so I don't know what a water breaking feels like, but I know that I've never had that feeling before. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think my water just broke." And I just remember sitting there like, this can't be happening, like, it's way too soon, this is not good. So, I got up, I was going upstairs to go tell my husband, and I mean, it's just, like, coming out of me still walking upstairs, and I told him, I'm like, "Hey, I think my water just broke, like, something's not right." And I called the on-call doctor, and at this point, it's, like, midnight. And she was like, "Look, I don't think it's your water, you're really early, but let's just get you in, assess you, take your time, take a shower, pack your bag, just in case you have to stay overnight, and just come on in and I'll see you when you get here if need be." So I was like, "Great." So we pack our bags, take showers, and as we're heading out to go downstairs, I felt like this really big pressure, and I'm like, "I gotta go to the bathroom." And I went to the bathroom and I just like felt something come out of me. And like my immediate reaction was like, just put your hand there.
Yeah.
So I put my hand there. I didn't know what it was. Didn't, I think honestly, I think I knew deep down what it was, but I didn't want it to be that. So I was just like, oh my gosh. So I screamed to my husband. He came running in the bathroom, which is like 2 feet away from our bedroom. And I was just telling him, like, you need to look down there, like, is it the baby? And I felt so bad because he wouldn't answer me because he didn't want to tell me. And I'm just crying and he's like, yes. And I just like lost it. I'm like, we have to call 911. Like, this is an emergency. Like, I have this baby halfway hanging out with me right now. So, funny moments now, like looking back, not
Mm.
funny in the moment, but he's trying to call the on-call doctor. And I'm like, babe, you need to call 911. This is an
911.
emergency. And I
Yes.
know he was just frantic. So he calls 911 and, they're getting all the information. And another funny thing, I remember hearing them say, how far along is she? And he was like, 15 weeks. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I am 19 and a half weeks. So, yeah. So I called 911. They were sending an ambulance and the fire department. And I remember just like screaming, like just crying, praying, like, why is this happening? And so the 911 operator was like, she needs to get on all fours. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, am I about to deliver this baby right here? So he went and put the dogs in the kennel. And I remember talking to the dispatcher and he was just trying to keep me calm. And he's like, we're going to help you, ma'am. And I just remember crying and I just wanted to wake up from this nightmare. And EMS and firefighters got there. And I will never forget, like, looking up and just seeing one of the firefighters, and she was a female, and just like looking at her face, like while she looked at me. And it just sticked in my mind. And she just looked so sad and heartbroken for me. And I just knew that it was bad. Like, I knew it wasn't going to end good. So they carried me down the steps, and then I got into the ambulance, and then my husband followed us so that we'd have a car there because it's like a solid 40 minutes away.
Mm.
So we're going down and speeding 70 miles an hour, getting to the hospital. At this point, it's like 1 a.m. So thankfully, nobody's on the road, which is good. So we get in, and I remember the EMS guy was like, there's going to be a lot of people when you get out of here. There's going to be a lot of questions. And he was just like mentally, trying to prepare me for it. And he's like, I just want to let you know, I'll be praying for you tonight. So I get out and there's like nurses and doctors everywhere. And I almost felt like I was in Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, this is insane. And I'm looking for my husband and I hear his voice and I'm like, okay, like he's with me. We're good. So we're going in and I get to the room and they immediately check the other baby's heartbeat. And he was breathing, he was alive, he was in there, his water, yeah, his fluid sac never bursted or anything. He was intact. And meanwhile, she's still hanging out of me. Like, I'm not understanding what's going on. And so the doctor came in, she checked me, and then I went to labor and delivery. So, yeah, that was like the assessment room, went to labor and delivery. And then I think I started running a fever. It's kind of blurry because I was in shock. But I started running a fever, which I think had started at the house. And I just remember getting the shake. And so I remember having to use the bathroom, and the nurse came over to me and she saw the baby. She's like, we have to start pushing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay. So I pushed the rest of Scarlett out, and she was born at 3:08. Obviously, she was stillborn. And I just remember looking at her and she was the tiniest, perfect little baby and like fully developed, like fingernails, toenails, like it was just insane. And I was in so much shock that today it's very blurry of like holding her, to be honest, because it's just traumatic. So then, of course, like I go into mom protection mode and I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, we got to keep this other baby safe. Like,
Yeah.
I kinda didn't put her on the back burner, but I'm like, "Okay, like, regroup and focus on the baby that's alive." So, I'm running fever, they're giving me Tylenol at this point. I mean, I had no sleep, so this is like 3, 5, 4 in the morning stuff, and I had a bunch of high-risk doctors come in and out, multiple nurses, and then my OB came that next morning, and she said, we think you have, and of course they did blood work and everything. So my high my white blood count was super high, which meant it could be infection.
Yeah.
So, and then with my fever. And so they did a bunch of blood work. The doctor came and talked to me and she said, we think that you have choreo, which is an infection in the uterus or the placenta or somewhere in there with the babies. And of course, I'm like, okay, so what does this mean? Like, and like, we need to monitor you. She said, usually, you know, if it's infected in your whole uterus, like the other baby has to come out or you can become very sick and get septic and it could lead to death. And I'm like, oh gosh, like, I mean, I'm not even worried about me. I'm just trying to save my baby. Like,
Yeah.
I could care less about me. So, I feel like I was in there for like 20 days. But it's just one long day.
Mm.
And so, trying to think. So yeah, all the doctors coming in, telling me what's gonna happen or what can happen, what they think's gonna happen. So I had another ultrasound. I was able to see him kicking and he was just so fine. And I'm like, man, like he's doing so fine. Like, I don't understand. Can we just like heal this infection and, it'd be done? And she was explaining how I'm not further along to try to give the antibiotics and then to induce to give birth maybe in like 3 weeks and have a survival rate, but it's just too much of a risk to risk your life. So she was coming back and she said, we're gonna take you off of the Tylenol and I'm gonna come back or a nurse gonna come back at 2 p.m. And if your temperature has gone down, then that is a good sign and maybe the infection did come out. Instead, if it's anywhere above, I think like 101 or something, then we're going to have to induce you because the infection's still in your body and your body's fighting it. So I'm like hoping and praying, like, please go away, fever, please go away. And when I looked at the clock and I saw 2 o'clock and the nurse came in and I knew that I had fever, like I was shaking, I was freezing, I was hot. So she took my temperature and it was like 103 and I just started crying and I'm just
Mm.
like, man, like I have to give my baby's life, like my baby's giving his life up for me basically to
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Like how dreadful is that to hear, like
Yeah.
as a mom?
Mm.
So yeah, I decided to get that epidural. I didn't really want it, but I just got it and I got induced and my water broke within like an hour to an hour and a half. And then literally he came like sliding on out before the doctor really even got to me. And he was alive and he was breathing and he was the cutest little thing I've ever seen besides his sister. And he was moving and I would touch his little finger and he would just move and he was perfect. And I'm like, man, like I just have to watch you take your last breath. Like, how traumatizing is that? And I can't do anything. Like, I remember my dad going over to the doctor saying, can you just save him? Like, and I'm looking at my husband and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know it's not my fault, but I just felt some kind of guilt, I'm supposed to protect him and my body failed. And it was just devastating. And he lived for like over an hour and 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And then, of course, I had them together. And that was sad, but cute at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, and then she had to manually pull out my placentas because they were not coming out. So, this lady was like elbow deep inside of me and I was screaming. I'm sure the people down the hall was like, oh gosh, it was bad. I don't remember the pain today, but
Mm.
I remember that I was screaming.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and then eventually the infection just went away,
Mm.
just like that after the antibiotics.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that terrifying story. It's so
Yeah.
it's gotta seem so surreal as you're saying it. I mean, I just can't imagine that whole
Yeah.
experience, and isn't it just so amazing, like, where do we find the strength to do these things? And it's
Mm,
not any because you want to, it's because you have to.
yeah. Have no choice.
Mm, wow. So, what are the next steps after something like that? Did you ever find was there any kind of reasoning for it or
So we sent the placentas off to get tested, and it actually came back that Jackson's placenta was the one that was infected and not Scarlett.
oh,
But then like some other research came back that there was some like bacteria in both of the placentas.
mm,
So it was just, and I mean, my doctor says she doesn't know if the infection came first or you went into labor first, but I know that the infection had to come first because and it sent me into labor. That was my body's way of trying to get rid of the infection,
yeah,
was going into labor. Because I mean, I've had a perfect pregnancy. I mean, this happened on a Tuesday, and that Friday was my anatomy scan, and everything was perfect. So I
yeah,
mean, it was the best weekend, and this happened like 5 days later. So it's out of nowhere.
yeah, and that's it these things do, they come from nowhere, and it's just yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do to stop it. It's just going through the motions, and it's like an out of body experience. I mean, oh my gosh. I'm sure when you
Yeah.
think back to it now as you were telling that story, it has to just feel like you can't even believe that you have lived through something like that.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll feel like this is just a nightmare or it never even happened. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like, gosh, did that even really happen? Or am I just back to the way I used to be? But that's not true.
Yeah. And how long ago was this? Because you're fairly
This
recent
is
out of
just October. So Scarlett was born October 5th, 2022, and Jackson was born the next day on the 6th.
so we're about 5
So
months
6 months
out.
ago.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So what have you been finding has been helpful in your healing?
Yeah. Connecting with other lost moms for sure
Yeah.
because they feel, I won't say 100% or exact, but they feel what I feel and they understand the crazy thoughts or things that go on in my brain. And I don't feel crazy.
Yeah.
That's helped. Listening to podcasts have helped tremendously. Reading books has helped tremendously. Learning to say no to things has helped a lot. And I
Mhm.
mean that as in not going to the baby shower, not going to the birthday parties. And it's hard to say no, but those help me in healing because if I go, I'm sad. So why bring up that part and then, bring the sadness to the party
Mhm.
because nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And it's just not fair to everything else going on. So it's better for me to just stay home. And, one day I might get to that point where I can go to those things. I'm sure it will happen eventually, but I'm just not there yet.
Yeah.
And so saying no to a lot of things has helped a lot for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been 23 years since I lost my twins, and
Yeah.
as you were saying that, I could feel every bit of it. I mean, it's incredible. It is something that never leaves you,
Mhm.
and then I think that is the most helpful thing is to hear other people's stories and know that you're not alone.
Oh, most definitely. I remember the first 2 weeks after coming home were just really, really hard. And I felt like there's no way I can ever smile. There's no way I'm gonna have joy. And I just remember listening to people's podcasts and I'm like, how are you just talking? Like, how is life okay? I'm like, when can I get there? Like, and that's another thing. There's no timeline. It never ends. And the only way to get through it is to go through it. And that's a huge thing too, is just taking it day by day. And every day it looks different. So that's
Yeah,
been a huge
does.
healing, learning journey as well.
What is something that you've been doing to maybe take care of yourself a little bit different than maybe even you were doing before?
I'm trying to think. I think about Scarlett and Jackson
Mhm.
before I do a lot of things. And that helped a lot, like as far as getting out of bed.
Mm,
But I think about them and, I'm back for the 80th time on this health journey, but I'm just trying to get healthy. And I'm just thinking like, I'd want to be this healthy mom for my kids and everything that I'm doing. I just kind of think about them and how I would portray myself to them as a mom and be a mom to them. So I'm still, putting them first and I think about them before I do a lot of things.
that's great. I love that. That's really good advice for sort of doing things, taking care of yourself to honor them
Mhm.
instead
Yeah.
of self-destructing because of them.
Yeah.
How's your husband doing? What's that experience been like as far as grieving between does he grieve in
Yeah.
a different way?
Yeah. We grieve totally different. I will say in the beginning, it was hard, as in not like fighting or anything, but just I wasn't understanding. Like, why are you going to go put a camera on a tree for hunting? Like, who cares? And I just remember being in Starbucks and we were in the drive through and I was like, why are you doing these things? Like, how are you doing it? Like, I don't get it. Like, all I want to do is lay on the sofa. Like, how do you even get up? And he is like, you just got to do it. Like, you just have to do it. And it doesn't mean I don't care or I'm not thinking about my kids when I do it, but I just don't want to just sit on the sofa all day. And I think asking that like opened up for me, like to understand the way he grieved it differently and that it's okay that we grieve differently, but I need to respect the way that he does grieve because if not, it could cause resentment. And I don't want that to go like that. I remember in the hospital, my dad saying, don't need to stick by each other's side. Like many people get divorced after this. And I can totally see how that is possible. And I mean, I'm just holding on to our foundation of our love, but I can see how that can separate couples for sure. And I've also read books on like dads grieving
Mm.
and I've read other stories of other dads doing the same thing that my husband does. And I'm like, oh gosh, thank goodness he's normal.
Yeah,
So that has helped a lot. And just remembering we're both hurting for the same exact reason. Literally, the same exact reason. Nobody's hurting more than the other. We're both hurting. So that I just fall back on the foundation of that and that we're on each other's team. We're not against each other.
that's
So we've come a long way.
yes, no, that's huge because I think and like you said too before, everyone grieves in their own way. Everyone grieves on their own timeline.
Mhm.
And I think because it's the same reason that we're grieving, we expect our partners to grieve exactly like we are. And then when they
Yeah.
don't, it can be really confusing.
Oh yeah. I'm the type that shows every emotion
Yes.
whenever I want. And he's not, which is okay. But I'm just like, at some point, I was like, man, you're doing this all wrong. Like, why aren't you shedding a tear? Like,
Yeah.
and then I remember him saying, like, but you don't know that, like, I could have been in the shower earlier and crying. So
Mm.
I'm like, that's true. I'm like, okay, Katie, take a step back. Like, you need to calm down. He still loves our kids.
Yes, yes, they do, and I'm a verbal processor, and my husband is very, like, what do I wanna say? Well, he's a medical professional, so everything is very clinical to
Mm.
him.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, I mean, we definitely had some
That sounds hard.
crazy conversations, and so I think keeping in perspective that he probably is grieving, just not
Oh, 100.
where you can see it or how you can see it or it's so different than what we do, I think, as women in general.
Yes.
And then, so let's talk about your faith. What were the things that came up for you around your faith? I know mine, I was really angry. And I was really, in the beginning, I was really angry and I couldn't believe that God could do this to me. And I really questioned a lot in my faith. Was that similar to you?
No,
No.
I really, I surprisingly, I didn't. Like, I remember being in the hospital and I was able to finally shower, and I put on worship music while I was taking a shower. And of course, I'm crying. I can barely move. Just gave birth to two babies. And I just remember praying, and I never even asked God, like, why'd you do this? I just was praying for comfort and to just, I need you because I can't do this alone. And I guess in that moment, I realized how much I do need him and that I can't do this alone and I don't want to. And I guess my anger just it never came to surface. I never went that route. And I mean, I think I was angry one day and it wasn't even with him. It was just in general. I was just so angry that
Just
my kids
angry.
weren't here. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really wasn't angry. I really immediately turned to him because I knew that he's the only one that's going to get me through it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it is so helpful when you do lean into it instead of
Mhm.
against it.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some things that surprised you about this journey so far?
I'm trying to think. The things that people say to you that are very hurtful, but I'm sure they're not intentional.
But
But
they're but they're her. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's the way that I think now also. Like, sometimes I think really terribly, and I mean that in a sense of like, when I see someone pregnant, I'm like, I hope the baby makes it. And I hate that I feel like that, but that's just who I am. That's just life now. But yeah, that surprised me a lot. Is that I didn't think I get very well at the beginning. I took it very offensively. Like if somebody wasn't telling me how sorry they were or just didn't acknowledge the hurt. Like, how are you not acknowledging that I've just lost two of my kids? Like, that is very hurtful. I mean, it's better to say something than nothing at all. Like, I just can't imagine, your loved one died and I don't say nothing. We just pretend like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of shocked me that people say some things and or don't say anything at all. That was pretty surprising.
Yes.
Still is.
Yes. It is very surprising. And it never I don't think there's anyone who's had this experience that hasn't had somebody say something to them that is
Hmm.
just shocking. Mhm.
Yes, off the wall.
So much education we need to do, right? For just
Yeah.
people I think people everywhere, and it's one of those things we're just so uncomfortable talking about that no one teaches us the right things to
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
everyone's
It's
too
like
uncomfortable to talk about it.
yeah, it's like everybody wants to walk away from it. It's like the plague. Like
Yeah.
we don't want to. We got to tiptoe around her because her life's different.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah,
but going
maybe
back,
if we don't talk about it, she won't remember it. Yeah,
yeah, because that happened.
that's possible.
Oh,
So what's next for you?
well, me and mom are starting a business, so that's fun. It's going to be like corporate boxes and things for events. And yeah, I'm just trucking along, back on eating healthy, going to the gym, taking care of myself, just trying to focus on, my husband and my stepson Bowen and just enjoy the time that we have and have stronger relationships with them.
Mhm,
And just praying in the meantime that, whenever the time is right and we're ready to move forward, I think my heart needs to heal a little bit more to open space in my heart for another baby, truthfully. So just learning and living and
yeah,
trying to share grief. And I don't share it for pity. I just share it to help others because I know how much it helps me. So if
mm,
I hear someone hears me talking about it, I could be of help to them.
mm.
So yeah,
Oh, I wanna acknowledge you so much for being willing to be here and tell your story. It's hard and it can be so emotional, but it is so important. It's so important that we do have a voice for this and that we do tell our stories and we let people know that our grief is real. And even though these babies weren't seen by anyone but us, they were
right.
real. And it the pain is intense and it's just an unimaginable situation that no one should have to go through, but by talking
Absolutely.
about it, it's just how so helpful to so many. What's something that you would like other lost mamas to know?
I My best advice is to take it day by day.
Mm,
And grief is not linear and just to feel every emotion. And I'm very strong about that because there's some situations where I don't have to cry because I don't need to in that moment where someone would think, why aren't you crying? And it's because I feel every single emotion whenever it pops up, no matter where it is. And I think that's just my biggest advice is just don't pretend like it didn't happen. Like face it and it's going to be here the rest of your life. Like there's no going around it. You gotta go through it. So that would just be my best advice alongside of, leaning on God because that He has pulled me out of the trenches.
mm,
And I don't know where I would be if I didn't have that for sure. So
mm,
yeah, and just another point I wanted to say was that I hold on to God's promises for eternity. And that is where I get a lot of comfort and strength. And knowing that one day I will see Scarlett, I will see Jackson. So that helps to get out of bed, knowing that this life on earth is just temporary and that cling to God's word and that He promises us that there will be another life after this, and that is eternity. So that makes me happy that I will see them again, which keeps me pushing forward.
oh my gosh, I am so happy that you added that, that's perfect. Yes. When things are really hard, when you're having a hard day, that is a great thing to cling to. Just knowing
Yes,
that you will get to see them again.
for sure. Can't
Uh,
wait.
I know, right? Well, thank you
Cannot wait.
so much, Katie, for being here and being so open and willing and vulnerable. And where can people find out more about you or follow you, or where do you want people to learn more about you?
Yeah. On Facebook, I'm just Katie Bordelon. And then on Instagram, I share stuff sometimes, just whatever I'm feeling. And it is Katie or Bordelon.
Okay.
And then I have a TikTok, but I don't really share that much. But if you want to find me, it's K, the letter T, Bordelon.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate it. And we'll have you back for an update maybe in another
Yeah.
6 months and see how it looks. Or maybe on the anniversary. We'll do a little
Yes, that would be
anniversary
great.
update for your babies. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.